Thank you, Becky, for the kind introduction. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. These are the words of the loyal, courageous, and determined Baptist minister, Martin Luther King Jr. As many of you may already know, Dr. King is known as one of the most visible leaders in the civil rights movement. But you have to ask yourself, how was he different from the others? How did he create change? The short answer is his voice. Not only did his voice develop a sense of hope, but it inspired people to get up and move. You see, if we, the people in this room, your family and friends, your boss or coworker, don't get up and do something to create change, history will continue to perpetuate, and as a society, we will not move forward, but fall back. At this moment, as we kick off our conference, A Time to Thrive, I challenge all of us to think about how historically, many people have seemed to not learn from the past. The civil rights movement, the labor movement, the women's suffrage movement, and many other movements have all repeated themselves in one way or another in our generation. The Black Lives Matter movement, the March for Our Lives, and the Me Too movement are just a few examples. To change the story and the outcome, I urge and encourage us as human beings to stop being reactive and instead become proactive. We need to ask ourselves, how decent are we really? Not in our intent, but in our actions, our lack of actions. This past fall, my transgender community in Massachusetts and I were hit with an unfortunate ballot question that questioned our right to live our lives authentically. I think that it's fair to say that this past summer was not easy for me. Dealing with all of the twisted stories being spun about the LGBTQ+ community by the media surrounding the election was not healthy for a 14-year-old. But over time, I realized that focusing on the negativity was not going to ensure that my human rights would be upheld. So, with MLK in mind, I decided to get up and move. In September, I began working with the Yes on 3 campaign, where I spoke at fundraisers, rallies, press conferences, and on panels regarding the upcoming election and how it would impact me as an individual and our community as a whole. As a result of the sleepless nights, long events, and stress, Massachusetts, the state that I'm fortunate enough to call home, voted yes on 3 and ensured that my human rights were upheld. Throughout this experience, I learned that taking action and remaining perseverant, resilient, and optimistic can lead to a better fortune. And yes, now I am able to live my life more authentically, knowing that I'm protected from discrimination legally, but the fight is not over. There are still dozens of states with no explicit statewide protections for LGBTQ people, meaning millions of Americans are vulnerable to being denied a job, a place to live, or service in a public place like a restaurant or store just because of who they are or who they love. Let me tell you, that is not going to slide under our watch. One way we can take action against this as a country is by passing the Equality Act. The Equality Act would amend existing civil rights laws to explicitly include sexual orientation and gender identity as protected characteristics and prohibit discrimination in public spaces and services and federally funded programs on the basis of sex. These important updates would strengthen existing protections for everyone. After all, each one of us here have been brought into this world by no choice of our own. Am I right? Yeah. And given that, many of us are very lucky to be born into a family that believes in happiness and unconditional love. But unfortunately, there are still youth nationwide that have not found their family, let alone their voice. So I believe that it is my job to use this platform that the Human Rights Campaign has given me to advocate for those whose voices have become shadows in society and for those who deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. I consider myself to be an agent of change, and I've learned that change does not come easy or overnight from personal experience. Instead, we must actively work to make the world a better, safer place for those who are most vulnerable. That's why I am encouraging you all to get up and move. As trailblazing cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small group of people, thoughtful, committed citizens, can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." It's remarkable to think that this is all we need, that each and every one of us in this room can help to create change. Whether it's educating yourself, talking to your family and friends, canvassing, hosting or attending phone banks, or simply being there for a friend. I believe that we can do this together. Thank you.